the art and science of human behavior. Literacy is a biological imperative for being human, for being civilized, for ensuring the survival of humanity, and this fact is quite easily provable. Every life support system of a living organism makes possible the existence of that form of life by processing what is available in its environment which is suitable towards that end and making that particular product a good. As Plato noted, each life support system has its own work to do which cannot be done by any other life support system. Each life support system is just one thing and has just one job. Any life support system which cannot do its job, as has been noted in some works on evolution, is actually detrimental to the organism prior to it becoming functional. This fact does not, however, negate the claim that survival is of the most fit, and that fitness is measured in terms of a life form's functional life support systems, as a whole. Many simpletons imagine that fitness is in terms of a single life support system, such as bodybuilders who die from their own practices, or as corporations who rape and poison the earth for what they believe is a profit. A mind is potentially the most powerful life support system possible, and it acquires that power, as Plato noted, by literacy, the ability to process correctly, which means in accordance with its biologically defined job, information which is predictive. We are, by biological design, supposed to know our effect on the environment and that effect in relation to ourselves, before we generate a cause, that is, we must know the effect before we become a cause. This is called predictive behavior. We learn the best form of behavior towards our environment through information processing, and the best is, by definition, survival. All information processing is, as Plato noted, as the computer has globally demonstrated, and as demanded by the definition of a thing in terms of its two elements, relative or relative difference, aka, verb, and the limit of that relative difference called a noun or correlative, aka, limit or container of that difference. Thus we denote data parsing as the construction of intelligible data packets, or things which is commonly observed as off, on, off, in terms of the parsing of electricity known as binary and binary recursion and information parsing. Intelligence is the ability to process information such that that processing produces the most favorable outcome towards human survival. The processing is called by many names: intelligence, wisdom, rational, brilliant, genius. In short, we simply change the shapes in our environment through data parsing, and we are aiming at a complex sustainable living environment. What may be predicated of anything is wholly determined by the definition of that thing. The simpler a person is, the more complex the universe appears, for they do not see the universal binary pattern of information processing. The simplicity of the definition of a unit endows it with universal applicability, which early Greeks simply state as the one and the many, or the noun and verb. Binary information processing gives us 4, and only 4, primitive systems of grammar, for if you start with the binary as of the perceptible and the intelligible, that would be 8. However, when we realize that where the idea is applied to, the perceptible or intelligible, that it does not actually change the number of primitive grammar systems which have come down to us with traditional names, common grammar, arithmetic, algebra and geometry. These are the 4 methods by which we can effect, intelligibly, binary recursion. It is achieved by taking the intelligible binary of the definition of a thing, and multiplying it by the perceptible symbols and methods of recursively applying those symbols, which is errantly called language, which is intelligible and can never be perceptible systems of grammar. One element is not the other element. The noun is not the verb. We learn from the intelligible of language to turn it into perceptible systems of grammar. One can then say, by intelligence alone do we learn to read the universe through the construction of a set of behaviors, or behavioral responses, which produce life-supporting systems of grammar. The foundation of intelligence is then the ability to establish an intelligible equality between the intelligible and perceptible, not as things in of themselves, but as behaviors of ourselves. Sadly, our intelligence is determined by evolution, not education. No one can talk another into becoming rational. Such a claim is, however, a very common and very prominent myth. Our ability to become rational human beings comes from our own inherent base behavior, often simply put, as the will to know the truth of things. We are now ready to comprehend Plato's allegory of being as a tame horse, with bit in our mouth guiding our footsteps. Take our grammar matrix, common grammar, arithmetic, algebra and geometry, and form an acronym, GAG, with the recollection of a horse being guided by its rider, called wisdom or intelligence. We are repulsed by the acronym, but it is a repulsion controlled by the desire for the good. Plato stated that one must, in a formal discussion, first define their terms. Now, since the recognition of this statement, simple-minded people, instead of doing the research as to what a definition is, decided that they assumed what it was, pasting words together in any manner they pleased, and calling it a definition, that is, not defining their terms at all and only imagining that they have. The result is, formal grammar, although attributed to Plato, never came into existence. That is, the human race is still very illiterate. This means that as the most powerful life support system possible, mankind is still or pre-literate. Mankind cannot yet effect his own salvation. During the evolution of any life support system, there is always a contradiction because that system has what is called cusps points in its evolution, which leads up to a point where it actually becomes functional enough to contribute to survival, its ability to process a given relative difference within the environment. Therefore, we always start with an error, that survival is a personal thing. Because of our simplicity we never see the universe, or the universal, we never see the actual relationship between the one and the many, we never comprehend that we cannot even make our life into an actual definition. We are all, then, born with what has been called original sin, stupidity and helplessness. However, redemption always requires our own effort, and social effort, to overcome that stupidity and helplessness. Formal systems of grammar are each particular methods of utilizing, intelligibly, binary recursion. Each one, we must dedicate our life to learning. Each one is developed using, step by step, binary thinking and presentation. We use binary to teach binary, which means we are always pairing, step by step, the intelligible binary, which never changes, to the perceptible binary, which is never the same. In the perceptible world, for every action upon a thing there is produced an equal and opposite reaction. In the intelligible, for every reaction, we must first know which action to choose. We choose every action based on prior knowledge of its reaction. In short, as intimated in the Judeo-Christian scripture, we learn to become the voice of God, which is only possible by learning how to read and write with our whole body, mind, and soul, which is the living relative constrained by correlatives which someday will be called man.
False words are not only evil in themselves, but they infect the mind with evil. Phaedo by Plato,